Today, let's talk about change and transition. Two words that we often use interchangeably. But what I love about this is when we actually spend the time to kind of dissect it, we find that we might not necessarily view the words the same way that we often use them. So I normally ask people three questions. When you think about the words change and transition, one, do you see them as the same thing? Two, are they easy? And three, do you see them happening at the same time? Now, people go through lots of conversation around this, and I love this conversation and all the share outs that we normally get. People will raise their hands and say, no, no, no. Some people will say, well, I see them as being the same. But as they get into deeper conversation, new things begin to surface, such as, well, they're not necessarily the same, but I see them as being two parts to the same process. Some people will say, I don't think you can get to one without the other. Some people will say, I think change is the bookend, meaning that first you decide that you want to change, and then you transition, and the transition helps you manifest the change on the other end. But what most people come to is the understanding that they are not necessarily the same thing. Well, are they easy? Again, the most common answer to that is absolutely not. No way, forget about it. But then it leads to more discussion around, does it depend? Does it depend on what the change or transition is? Does it depend on how much time you get? Does it depend on who decides the change or transition or who's in control of the change or transition? And from that, most people say, well, yeah, I think that that does matter. And then the last one, do they happen at the same time? The most common answer is no. The question is, how do people see them? Most people see change as being something that happens pretty fast and transition takes more time. So the definitions that we share with people around change and transition are these. Change, something that normally happens first in the process, happens pretty fast, it happens externally, and also can happen with or without our permission. An example of that is the weather changes, right? You wake up in the morning, we think it's going to be one way, and by the afternoon or end of the day, the weather may have completely flipped. Happen fast, happen externally, with or without our permission. Change. Another example of that is, let's say you're in a room full of people and someone walks over to the wall and pushes that button, and all of a sudden the lights in the room change. Again, fast, externally, hopefully with our permission, but that's change. Transition, on the other hand, we ask people to view a little bit differently. And that is because we ask people to view transition as something that normally happens after change. It normally takes a little bit more time. And the reason why we ask people to view it as taking more time is we ask people to view transition as an internal process that happens in both the head and in the heart. It's a mental and emotional thing. And as a result, it really only happens with our permission. Meaning things around us can change all day long, but we may not always decide to go through the mental and emotional work that it takes to actually transition. I'll plug in a couple examples for you. If anyone's ever relocated to a new city, the day that you receive your address, by definition, you are now a resident of that new town or city. Change. The question becomes, how long did it take for us to mentally or emotionally transition into being a resident of that new city? Right? Probably took a little bit more time. If you've ever changed jobs, right? You start a new job or new position. Again, the day that you start, you are now the director of ... Change. The question becomes, how long did it take for you to actually mentally and emotionally transition into that new position or to that new company? Rarely do they happen at the same time. Here's why we share this information with people. Many of us have heard that human beings naturally resist change, or that we don't like change, or that we struggle with change. By these definitions, what we found is that most people really don't struggle with change. Change just happens. Where most people struggle is with the transition process, and that is hopeful information. Why? Change is the constant, but here's what we know about transition. Through the skills and the mindset tools that we share, we can help people through that transition process. And change plus transition, at the end of the day, brings about transformation. Change is going to constantly be there in our lives. The question becomes, when the change presents itself, do we know how to transition? And the better we transition, the more success we'll have.